All right, there we are. I think, yep, we got a microphone. We will crank the microphone up because people seem to like that, and we'll see if that deals with that appropriately. Fiddle around with the lighting a little bit. It feels a little harsh today. I have to play around a bit with the lighting to make me not look crazy because now we've got a new camera, which we're figuring out. Trying to make all that make sense. And then, so we can start the show here in just a few minutes. Need to get that going. Little cooled off there. Looking forward to tonight. I want to double check here to make sure I've got the... Yep, those are all loaded in. Good. Don't have to worry about that. I think we're going to be good to go. I may have to adjust the camera a little bit to figure all that out. But it's definitely happier with focusing. That's more in focus. And now I'm in focus. Imagine that. It actually knows how to handle focus. So yeah, this is our first night with the new camera. And we're going to be having some fun with that. Hopefully it will be appropriate for what we're doing. And we're streaming that out in somewhat higher quality than normal with the new CPU from a couple of weeks ago. So it's a good feeling that everything is ready to go. Hey, Tonto. Doing well. Glad to be doing the show tonight. So the plan here is we're going to have the news and the anime season preview, and then Otaku no cooking. No dramatic reading tonight because I looked through and there wasn't much in the way of crazy stuff. There was some crazy stuff on the forum 20 years ago, but nothing I could really extract into a single post. It was little responses back and forth. Hey, Kuma. So unfortunately, the dramatic reading just didn't work out this week. Apparently, folks were referencing some like really crazy stuff going on in the forum, but I couldn't find it. So that's not going to work. And of course, the anime review is being replaced with all my notes from this season's anime. And we'll see how that goes. In previous quarters, it's been taken about an hour to go through all the anime of the season, although that was less than comes out this season. Spring is a busy season for anime. So we'll see how that goes. Meanwhile, we can get started with the news. It is good to have the news. And I can just get the thing going here. Yeah, oops. Got my little... Whoop. We're fine. We're all fine. We knocked everything over. Destroyed everything. That'll be great. Let's do the news. It's it's news time, right? Got to do the news. All right. Let's see if we can get the news in, and we'll be good to go. Might as well do that. All right. Welcome back to the latest anime news for the week ending April 20th, 2018. And I always like to start the news with a new anime announcement, and this week we actually have one. Yay! Studio Dean has confirmed their next anime series, Agu Tensai Ningyo, or Agu Genius Dolls. It will adapt a Chinese comic that was published on the Chinese site Tencent Comic, part of the huge Tencent website service thing. The comics is fairly popular, seeing as how it currently has over 9.5 billion views after launching only 4 years ago. So, yep, we'll see where that goes and what we actually get out of that. Wow. Meanwhile, Moro Hosoda's next film, which is a Mirai of the Future, or Mirai no Mirai, will have its worldwide premiere at a spin-off of the Cannes Film Festival, kind of. The director's fortnight is meant to elevate the visibility of lesser-known works, and, for example, hosted a screening of The Tailor Princess Kaguya in 2014. The film actually opens in Japan July 20th, and this is the new poster for it. That's pretty darn cool. Also coming, more new Gundam. The next Gundam work has been announced, Mobile Suit Gundam Narrative, that's the title, or Gundam NT. You heard that right. It's set in Universal Century 0097, right after Gundam Unicorn, and is part of a new project within Sunrise to continue the Universal Century timeline. There were also accidental reveals of a film trilogy for Hathaway's Flash and a sequel to Gundam Unicorn, but I haven't seen any official confirmation on those yet. It was part of a slide. There was some confusion over that last bit, as it was described as having an overseas drama format. Folks thought that that meant a live action adaptation, but a Sunrise official clarified that the phrase meant an anime drama created with the same behind the scenes structure, similar to that used in Western TV. Well, here's something that we see it, whatever it is. Whether that is a real thing or not, hopefully it will be. Who knows? Meanwhile, anime is coming to Brazil. Crunchyroll will launch a 1-hour anime block on Brazilian television starting tomorrow, actually, April 21st, as of when I'm recording this. It will run subtitled episodes of Re:Zero and Black Clover starting at 8 p.m. on Saturdays, and then again starting from 11 a.m. to noon on Sundays as a repeat. The block will also include an 8-minute live action segment with 2 Crunchyroll community managers in Brazilian Portuguese. So, more anime in Brazil. Cool. Speaking of anime on television, My Hero Academia is coming to Toonami. All 3 seasons are slated to air on the programming block starting May 5th, so a couple weeks from now, at 11:30 p.m., sandwiched between Dragon Ball Z Kai and Furry Curry. So, feels like a lead-in to Furry Curry, maybe? Who knows? Trying to get some more attention on that. Not a bad thing. Finally, a bit of an update to a previous news story. Last week, the Japanese government asked ISPs in Japan to block access to various pirate websites, among them naming 3 particular pirated manga websites that are really big. This past Tuesday, one of those sites, Mangamura, went offline. But wait, before anyone worries too much about censorship, it looks like the site was shut down voluntarily. Both its main site and its image server were shut down in a way that seemed to only be achievable by the site's actual owners and administrators, not the ISP. NHK, the Japanese TV channel, claims the site is administered by at least one person from America. Is it you? Alright, so that's the news for the week. Kind of interesting stuff. Definitely some odd things going on. Remarkable things. New anime, good. New Gundam, very good. It's Kuma. Kuma is the one responsible for all the pirated manga out there. I knew it. I knew it. But it's someone from America, so it can't be Kuma. Oh well. Although they said other countries as well. America, the Ukraine, and other countries were all involved in that site. So, who knows? To me, that's one of the interesting things about the story is that they're I assumed and it's not as far as I know, this site did not host translations. It was just although it may be actually let me see here. That is Mangamura. I did a web image search, and what I'm seeing on there does look maybe that was translated as well. Those could have been scamlations. So okay, fair enough. That's a reasonable thing to be worried about. Oh, a bear cave. Well, that makes sense. You know, where else would you do your translations from than a bear cave? All right. What I want to know is if there were any Yuri Kuma involved. But yeah, there's. It's kind of interesting that we have so many. Top secret, of course. There's so many of these legal sites out there. The fact that the Japanese government is actually stepping in to do something about it after a lot of complaints. And let's be clear here. That it's not that the Japanese government is operating just completely out of nowhere. People have been complaining to the government for a long time, saying this stuff is illegal. Why aren't you doing anything about it? And so the government is now moving forward. Although it's weird. Exactly. It's weird that the original publishers, like Kodansha and so forth, aren't sending cease and desists. On the other hand, maybe they are. Maybe the publishers have reached out to those sites and said, please shut down. I have Twitter. It's G Archaeology is the Twitter handle, but I don't use Twitter. I have it set up to automatically rebroadcast when the videos go out, but I started using Twitter a long time ago, and years and years ago, and as Brent Newhall, and I ended up just stopping using the Twitter account because it's not worth my time investment, unfortunately. Like, I understand the whole audience thing, and that is not. I agree that Twitter is a great way to grow an audience, but I do not have the right constitution to be on Twitter, every hour of the day to grow that audience the way it needs to from Twitter, unfortunately. I've tried, and it's just not in my personal personality. So, however, if one of you would like to volunteer, I would be happy to have one of you take over my Twitter account for Geek Archaeology and post stuff, if you would like to. I will happily take on volunteer labor if anyone wants to volunteer. That is totally a thing. Done that several times already over the course of the channel, actually. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it makes sense. All right. So let me go through here and just remind myself of my notes for the things. Right. Right. Yeah, that's good. Want to make sure I get the right notes for each of these. Yeah. That was a weird one. Yep. Good. Yeah. Cool. I think I can cover all this stuff pretty reasonably. Yep. Yeah, the thing. Oh yeah. All right. Cool. Yeah, I'm totally up for that, Fisher. If folks want to help out with this stuff, we can make that happen. If anyone's interested, either let me know in the chat or post in the Discord, and I can start doing that. I have nothing against using social media more and that kind of stuff. I just, again, don't have the personality to be on social media that often. I could, but I am A, not good at it, and B, it makes me a very angry person. So it's just not right for me, unfortunately. All right, let's do the thing here. It's down here. Although I can already tell I need to take a quick break. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of another panel because I just realized I need to, this is going to take a little while, and I need to use the facilities. So I'll be back in just a few minutes. So I'll give you just a minute or two of a panel. Be right back. This guy named Hiroki Azuma wrote this book called Otaku, Japan's Database Animals. And his premise is that there are these kind of three elements of otaku. First is that otaku in the Japanese sense of like obsessive collector of anime, like we have no candle, we hold no candle to the average Japanese otaku. That's a very Japanese thing, to be that obsessed with something that you own every edition of every version and everything, right? Not that other people couldn't be it, but that it was typically Japanese. Also that because anime was so focused on all these moe characters, people were starting to mine anime just for their own characters, just for a character they liked. And anime existed to pull screenshots from, to pull music from, to pull clips from, to create animated GIFs out of. You weren't a fan of the show, you were a fan of the Meganeko or the Loli or what have you, the Tindera. And animals, because one of the things that separates us from the lower animals, classically, is the ability to hold off on future enjoyment in return for, waiting for something right now. And Otaku are not very good at that. We don't, his idea is that Otaku, we're increasingly expecting more stuff now. You need to give me this thing now or I'll complain about it online. I expect this now. You saw this in American fandom, where they would license an anime series, and because you didn't license the OVA, folks would complain and boycott. Right? It was that kind of sense of entitlement that he was complaining about. And one of his bigger points is that the problem with this direction and this move towards Moe was the fact that you now had to have every Moe archetype in every show. Right? And all of these tropes had to be in there because people, if there wasn't a Loli, they weren't going to watch. Or what have you. Sometimes parody to wonderful effect in some shows. Love Girls in Concert. Anyway, his idea was that this is a problem for anime as an industry because you're not telling interesting stories when the whole point of your show is just to give somebody something to look at and pull content out of. Nobody was caring about the story anymore. Nobody was really caring about the characters. They were caring about attributes of the characters. Now, I think he was going too far. I don't think things were as dire as he claimed, right? But it was an interesting premise. And so the question was, how would the anime industry respond to that? And we started seeing some responses to that, particularly with Magical Girl series. The Magical Girl series suddenly started picking up this idea that we can do Sweet Precure, those girls punch and kick. It's a much more violent show than your typical Magical Girl series. Magical Girl Lyrical Nanoha introduces a very dark subplot into the first series. It had been done before in shoujo series, in a Magical Girl series in general, but it was very popular in this idea that, we can kind of subvert the tropes. We can have Moe characters, but still tell a story. And so folks started playing around with this. And we entered the postmodern era. And I cannot think of a more perfectly postmodern anime series than The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. They air the episodes out of order, out of chronological order, to make you think about what's happening and why one thing is happening now and that's the thing they were talking about in that. It's very deliberate. Okay. Perhaps more of that some other time. Let's get on to the anime of the season, because that would be fun. Actually, can I get will this give me some better light? I have another light over here. See if that helps. A little bit, I think. Yeah, I like that. All right. Let's get to it. Noop. Noop. Oh. One sec. That doesn't work very well. Fix the camera position. Whoa. There we are. Okay, there we go. Hello, Dark Blacksmith. Good morning from Austria. Yes, Megalobox is an Ashita no Joe spinoff. Reimagining, kind of, which is kind of weird. Oh, I should mention one other thing before I do this. So, originally, Workshop Wednesday for next week was going to be this electronics project, but it's not going to be, because something happened. Workshop Wednesday is going to be this. Unopened, but Workshop Wednesday I'll be breaking this out and playing with this. Hopefully, assuming it takes less than 2 hours to assemble. We'll find out. So, that's going to be fun. But, hey Game Escape, let's get to the spring anime guide. One other thing about that, actually, and I've not looked at anything anyone said about Labo since, today. I'm not spoiling myself about it, but it says on the box, design your own toy con using your household items, invent new toy con using simple programming controls. So apparently, you can build new stuff with these things. That's interesting. it originally looked like it was more of a closed system. So, yeah. All right, let's do the anime preview guide. Need to have that fired up over here. All right. It is spring 2018, which means there's new anime, a whole bunch of new anime, which I'm going to review. I've seen the first episode of all of these shows, and I'm going to talk about what I saw and what I thought. A few quick notes. I do not review any straight sequels or straight follow-ons from previous shows. So a straight up season 2, I'm not reviewing here because you're probably not going to jump onto season 2 before watching season 1, and that will tell you if you want to watch season 2. Also, I skipped anything that clearly looked aimed at like kindergartners. You know, shows that are just very much rounded character designs, walking around gardens, you know, and things like that. Those sort of things I skipped as well. Everything else, I think I watched. I covered everything on Crunchyroll and High Dive, and I think that's pretty much everything else. Everything available. May have missed one or two things, but this is like 34 anime. So I think this will give you a pretty good idea of the season. So let's go ahead and get started with 3D Kanojo Real Girl. And this is actually an anime series that I had a bit of a problem with because the main character is an otaku who ends up getting a girlfriend. And so it's sort of a romantic comedy series, but the main character is this very reserved, kind of a jerk otaku. And it wasn't quite clear from the show. This show seemed to be about how initially being an otaku is okay, but then as soon as he meets that girl, he gives up being an otaku, like he says that, so that he can date her. And it just seems like a weird mixed message for an anime series clearly aimed at otaku. So maybe that message gets modified over time, I don't know, but it felt like it was kind of setting up otaku as being ridiculous and silly and kind of pathetic, which is just kind of a difficult thing to appreciate as somebody who likes this stuff. That said, there is it's effectively paced and directed, so it's certainly very clear what's going on. It's slow-paced, typical romance anime series, very much set in the modern real world. It does feel like it's a bit of a kind of a ripoff of like a Densha Otoko or Please Teacher kind of a series, but certainly not poorly done. Just, I think, some mixed messages there. Who knows? But that is available on High Dive if you're interested in that. Certainly not a low-quality thing. And there's Alice or Alice, which I was certain was an adaptation of, like, a hentai visual novel. It's about a boy who lives with a bunch of girls who call him Oni-chan all the time. It's, you know, very much kind of what you'd expect out of that kind of a concept. I believe it's an ONA, or at least very short episodes, I think 5-minute long episodes. Very fan service heavy, cute. I watched, I think, episodes 1 and 2, and there's some real fan service in there. Some sort of brocon stuff going on there as well. It feels like a very light, fun, silly thing if you want to watch cute girls calling you Oni-chan all the time. And I'm not judging. It's one of those things where, you know, there doesn't seem to be much more depth than that, but it is very much that kind of, you know, cutesy girls who are falling all over you. Then there are cases where they literally, like, you see things from the main character's perspective, so they are looking at the viewer and saying, Oni-chan daisuki. So, yeah, one of those kinds of shows. All right, moving on. Butlers x Battlers. This, if I recall correctly, Crunchyroll. Rather otome kind of a concept, so definitely a lot of hot guys. A lot of characters in this, a lot of things going on. Interesting concept. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Focuses on a hot guy main character, and there's some intrigue and mystery going on in his world. Living in this kind of definite sort of modern day, as I recall, environment, but really cool, cool, interesting setup for the premise and where the characters are going. So hard to tell where that's going, but it seemed like a good establishing first episode. I think it's one of those things where they bit off a lot in this show in terms of juggling a large cast of characters. There's a fantasy sci-fi element as well. So there's just, it's a lot to do. Animation is, I would say, above average, maybe 7 out of 10 for the animation. You know, good, not amazing, but they may be saving that for later episodes. So no complaints. We will see where that goes, though. Moving on to Caligula, which is a show that I was quite interested in for this season to see what that was going to be, because I saw what the concept was, which is basically, I love this idea. There's this sort of Hatsune Miku style virtual idol, and she achieves consciousness, whereupon she starts paying attention to all of these song lyrics that are being submitted to her all the time. And they're all being submitted by angsty 14-year-olds who are constantly writing about how awful the real world is and how much it sucks to be alive. So she becomes convinced that the real world is this horrible hell in which humans are trapped, and so has sucked real people into her world. You don't see much of that in the first episode, I should point out. But I really love that idea of kind of a twisted virtual idol who is saving humanity from itself based on this misunderstanding of what song lyrics actually are. But the tone and vibe of the show is much more serious. It's definitely aimed at like a teen audience, where there's action, there's that sort of high school drama stuff. Yeah, very weird title, but I'm pretty sure that there's a reason for that. And basically it appears to be about the main characters in this world trying to break out of it. So if you've seen Angel Beats, very much that concept in general. The action has a pretty high animation budget behind it, and there's a lot of like philosophy into it. The main character is very interested in these questions of philosophy and what it means to be a human, and it brings up quotes from like Greek philosophers and things along those lines, and personality profiles. So the staff have clearly done their research into that, what it would mean psychologically to be trapped in these environments. And so the psychological aspects seem to be there. The first episode is very much establishing and setting up the characters and some of the situation without really explaining much of what's going on. So be aware that it is, it is sort of an episode 0 instead of an episode 1. I was fairly impressed. This is the kind of concept that could be done, I think, very poorly. It could be done in a very obvious way, but they didn't do that. It is definitely something where, they're focusing on stuff. There also seems to be a few little references to other anime stuff. Like there's a girl that reminds me a lot of Lane. There's a Whisper of the Heart kind of visual image reference, things along those lines. What's also interesting is it's kind of acknowledging like Yelp society and internet and reviewing things and so forth in a way that anime generally doesn't. And some interesting weird visual elements in there as well. So if you like those more psychological, thoughtful shows, Caligula seems to be heading in that direction. Might just turn into a lot of weird action and kind of random philosophical statements, but who knows? Certainly better than it could be. Comic Girls is one of the shows I just really enjoyed this season. It is about a group of high school girls who all live in the same all-girls dorm and make manga. On the one hand, it is very much a bunch of cute moe girls who are all striving for their dream and being very cute while doing so. High animation budget. The girls are very much engineered to make you go, "Aww," the entire time. And I fell for it. I totally loved this stuff. Art is beautiful. I wrote it down on here. Dang, the animation. And just a lot of stuff. Very much in that sort of Kyoto Animation vibe of art style. A couple other fun little jokes. I was definitely laughing at some of the comedy in here. And so I really like that. And there's even, like at the very end, there's a tag, something that happens earlier on, and it shows that a character has changed a little bit over the course of the episode. So good on them there. Also should point out, it's set in Fukushima. Yeah. So I'm intrigued. I really like this one. I would say it's more of the relaxing show of the season, kind of the just, enjoy yourself season. Although Crossing Time might also be that one. It is a anime of short episodes about characters who are pausing for a train to go by, and just a little conversation they have during that period. Just little moments while waiting for a train. Definitely a comedy, although that first episode contains a little bit of, I would say, sort of comedic drama. Nothing massive, but it's cute. It's these little moments with characters, interacting with things and kind of dealing with people back and forth. So that is kind of that was definitely fun. And if you're looking for something along those lines, where it's just kind of fun little comedic moments between characters, and I believe it's different characters every episode, I think you'll enjoy Crossing Time for that kind of a thing. Also, a fun little commentary on gender insensitivity in that first episode, which I kind of found funny. Speaking of gender, Cutie Honey Universe over on High Dive. This is it actually appears to be a sequel to the original Cutie Honey. I thought it was going to be a remake, but that's unclear. Maybe it's kind of a reimagining. Cutie Honey is remarkable for the fact that it had a lot of nudity and a lot of violence in the original, and that is here in spades, if not amped up, in this first episode. So Cutie Honey is this crusader for justice, and she transforms. There is none of the world building. They don't establish anything about the character. She does all the transformation sequence, and all that stuff is already there. But this creates a completely different motivation for the antagonist, which really surprised me in terms of where the protagonist is going. Like I leaned forward and was like, huh, why did she say that? And was kind of scratching my head at the end in a good way, in terms of I don't know where she can go with that. Why would she be doing that? I'm intrigued to learn more. So good on them for there. Again, a lot of nudity, some Yuri stuff, some strong violence, and not just violence, but like you feel bad when this one character dies. They actually make that feel significant. So good on them there. It also feels kind of like a 70s anime in a lot of senses, in the sense that definitely the art is upgraded, the animation is upgraded, but it has that kind of goofiness, that kind of over-the-topness of a lot of 70s anime concepts. It keeps a lot of that stuff. Also, a lot of the character designs are upgraded, but essentially the same. So you have Panther Woman is one of the bad guys. Okay. So if you're at all familiar with Cutie Honey, this is definitely Cutie Honey. It is all that stuff. Moving on to Dances with Dragons. This is honestly one of the more middle-of-the-road series this season, if you will. Where for example, the opening credit sequence has a lot of choppy animation, and a lot of it is reused from the first episode. So it's like, that's not a great sign. A lot of exposition, a lot of politics. It is this weird combination of modern and fantasy, where it's set in a world where magic has been reintroduced to the world, and has spawned dragons and things, but it's people in trench coats fighting dragons. So neat concept there. Unfortunately, it feels a little bit like a kitchen sink world, where there are elves and people next to each other, but it doesn't really it doesn't feel like a cohesive world from episode 1. And that's a very hard thing to judge from episode 1. So I'm not trying to say they did a bad job. I'm just saying that they throw a lot at you. It feels a lot like something that was made for fans of the existing material. They don't really pull you into and situate you in this universe very well. There's some exposition at the beginning kind of explaining all of it. But again, it feels like it's more for existing fans than others. But I can certainly see some people, getting into this. It's a fun sort of shonen action sort of a concept. A little, aimed at a slightly older audience, I would say. Still sort of older teens. It feels like it's really trying to be quirky and different. And it remains to be seen whether that creates a cohesive story or setting as it goes on. A lot of these concepts can kind of fall apart with that at some point. Moving on to Devil's Line. I am not going to tell you much of anything about Devil's Line. because there is a big twist later on in episode 1. And I'm not going to tell you anything about what kind of twist that is, whatever. But they are clearly trying to hold that off. I was impressed that the characters go to college. They are actually college students. We don't see college a lot in anime. The episode sets up some odd juxtapositions in terms of different characters, like a character trying to fight something that is obviously too powerful for that person, or trying to do something that seems out of character. And I think that is very intentional. This is about characters put in very awkward, or not just awkward, but very difficult situations, and seeing how they respond and what they do as a result of that. I had some strange feelings about some of there's a romance in it, a quasi-romance in it, hint of romance kind of a thing, and some of the things the characters said about each other just felt a little weird and wrong. But again, that may be one of those things where they don't, they just haven't explained all that later on. So definitely episode 1 kind of a thing. Animation is mediocre, not terrible, not great. Some stiff movement in the animations, and again, sometimes that works its way out as the show goes on. There's definitely a Twilight vibe to it a little bit in terms of some of these romantic relationships. So who knows where that's going? Can't tell, but an interesting concept, and a nice twist in it. Moving on to Doreku over on High Dive. This feels like a hentai anime where they just said, let's go legit by deleting all the actual hentai scenes and just release that. It is about this device that goes into your teeth, not permanently, but you sort of set it next to your teeth, and you do that, and somebody else does it with a paired device, and then you make a bet with the other person. And if you lose the bet, this device sends a message to your brain that makes you completely subservient to the other person. You basically become their slave. And that's the concept. And there's a strong sexual element to all of it. It's pitched as more of a psychological story, sort of a horror thing about why would people do this to themselves, and people do this to get back at people. I should point out there is, as a result, there is a lot of stuff around non-consensual sexual experiences, right? That is inevitably going to be interwoven with this kind of a concept, and they lean very heavily on that, as you can see in the art, right? That's very kinky, as Tonto says in the chat room. So just be aware of that. From what I've seen, they are doing a good job of delving into the psychology of that and why someone would do that and things along those lines. And I don't want to spoil too much about that. There are a few things which I wasn't impressed with. There are times when the protagonist is walking along and is monologuing their personality at you. I do this and I do that, and I don't really like this over there. And it's like, you should be showing that to us in the show instead of telling it to us in monologue, but whatever. Some weird musical choices, things along those lines. But overall, I thought it was an interesting show. Definitely an interesting concept. And I'm probably not going to watch any more of it because I think it feels a bit too exploitative of its concept. But it's the kind of show where if you watch this, I would understand why someone would watch this, why someone would be interested in this. I think they're handling that concept with, I mean, certainly a lot of unnecessary kink, but also with a respect for the subject matter, if you will. Over there on High Dive, they seem to be getting a lot of the sexy stuff this season. Moving on to, I wouldn't really call this sexy, Fist of the Blue Sky. This is a spin-off of Fist of the North Star, actually a prequel to Fist of the North Star, technically, about the, one of the people who have this fighting style that Ken has, and this is also Ken, set in 1920s or 1930s Hong Kong amongst gangsters, triads. So love that whole thing, that whole tone, gangsters, machine guns, but also, Chinese clothes, and that interesting combination of modern with traditional Chinese clothing, stuff like that, and it's entirely CGI. And that's the big problem with this, is that the problem with the CGI, the CGI character designs do an amazing job of copying the art style. It looks like the art style. I have no problem with that. But apparently, in order to actually produce 24 minutes of it, they had to lower the frame rate dramatically. So these characters have a pretty low frame rate for the entire thing. And that's the problem in an action series. It just really feels cheap a lot of the time. This also isn't helped by the fact that they also copy the overall sort of tone of Fist of the North Star, where there's some goofy moments. There are characters who get, killed off early on in somewhat humorous ways, where, the classic thing of, the very puffed up villain who gets, wiped off the face of the earth in, minute 10 of the episode. And those things are handled much more lightly and sort of upbeat. And that tone feels really weird with these CGI characters. Plus the art style, all the guys are giant beefcake, Arnold Schwarzenegger muscle men, which sometimes does not translate very well into CGI either. They just look weirdly proportioned based on what we're looking for. So I'm not against CGI, but I think this is a case where the CGI was not a great match for the studio and the concept. That said, it's another example where if somebody got into this and watched this, I would totally understand it. It is an exciting action concept, and they do a good job of setting up the relationships between characters, where Fist of the North Star tends to be a very over-the-top concept, but the fact that it actually it establishes who is who and who is on what side and why they care about each other in that first episode, quite impressed. That's good on them there. We'll see where that goes and if anyone is going to be angry or not. I am certainly not angry about Full Metal Panic: Invisible Victory. I'm reviewing this because I love Full Metal Panic. I know it's a sequel, but if you're at all into Full Metal Panic, yes, this is the thing. This is what you've been waiting for. Okay, moving on. A remake, actually, Gegege no Kitaro. This show has a really interesting problem. Namely, the original anime came out in, I believe, the very early 70s, or the late, I think 68, late 60s. And as you can imagine, the art style was kind of crude, based on a very popular manga. So this franchise has been around for years and years and years. There was a remake in the 80s, I think. So this is one of those franchises that's been around for decades and decades, but really isn't modern and relevant to the average, Joe off the street, right? The average kid has heard of Kitaro, but isn't really familiar with it. So this series has to reintroduce them to Kitaro, who is this young boy who can see spirits and yokai, Japanese monsters kind of, and he banishes the ones that are misbehaving, defeats them. So on the one hand, it is kind of this shonen action concept. On the other hand, it's basically horror. And some horrible things happen to Kitaro, especially in the manga. And this show does all of that. I own, 6 or 7 volumes of Kitaro manga in English. Pretty much everything that's been released so far officially in America. I love this character, this franchise. And they make this an action-y shonen series with some outright scary horror moments. Like, thumbs up on that. Full color art style. It doesn't look dated, although it looks very weird, and that's very much, the way it should be. And I'm just really, really impressed. One of those things where I'm like, yes, this ticks all the boxes, at least for a Kitaro fan. And so if you want something kind of weird and creepy, and but also more modern and actiony, and it is more that shonen style, Kitaro, great job on that. We'll see if they can continue it for future episodes. Moving on to Golden Kamui, another anime that I actually happen to have the manga for. at least the first couple volumes. Based on a manga with the concept of a, well, no, that is explained in the first episode. I don't want to spoil that. This is another difficult thing to adapt in a sense because the main characters are a man in his, I think, late 20s, early 30s, and this young teen girl, both of whom are stoic badasses. And it's very easy for that to feel very dull, you know, where they don't have much to talk to each other about, and they're just kind of stoic all the time. They did a great job here of making both of these characters appealing to the audience without reducing their badassedness. It is set in, I believe, the 20s or 30s in the very north of Japan, Hokkaido, and it is very much dealing with the times of that period, some of the stuff that was going on kind of historically, although the actual story is fictional, as well as some of the culture in Hokkaido. So you get some interesting elements about that. I'm not aware of exactly how accurate it is to things about like the Ainu, which are the native peoples of Hokkaido, are a major factor in this show. I do not know how accurate that is and how much every single detail matches historical Ainu. But there seems to be a lot of detail about that, a lot of research into it. So if you're interested in that, you will get some elements of it in Golden Kamui. It's fundamentally, though, it is an action series aimed at an older audience. So it is more in the genre. It's definitely more of a seinen story, I would say, more in sort of a Cowboy Bebop or Trigun genre sort of block than other things, other shows around there. But still, you know, good fun action stuff, some comedy elements along those lines. So neat stuff there, and we'll have to see. And I just like the fact that it is aimed at that older audience. Another sequel, which I'm just going to talk about because I love Gundam Build Divers. This is the third Gundam Build series. I'm not going to talk too much about it, just to say that it is a more comedic, more light and upbeat series than the previous ones. The first one was more of a Gundam parody while telling its own story. The second season was a shonen premise and structure as a Gundam series, so more of like a One Piece or a Naruto in the Gundam universe. Gundam Build Divers is a bit more of a light action adventure story within the Gundam universe. I enjoyed it, FYI. Moving along. And also, you definitely do not have to have seen any Gundam to appreciate Gundam Build Divers. Moving on to another surprise this season, Gurezeni Money Pitch. This is a baseball anime all about the economics and the career of being in baseball. Meaning, the main character is this, I think, 29-year-old, 26-year-old relief pitcher, and he spends the entire episode talking about the salary he makes and how much salary he needs to make next year and all the different career decisions he has to make to stay in the game and to be able to fulfill his career and have enough money by the time he finishes to actually be able to live off that for the rest of his life, right? You know, he's not a superstar making millions of dollars a year. He's making a comfortable living, but he better not drop off because then he's not going to have enough built up to retire off of. So that's a really, really interesting concept. And it is told in a fun, light way. So the tone is definitely more of a modern comedy where it's a light, upbeat story in general. Think of more of maybe a K-On! In concept, or maybe even a Lucky Star. So it's a fun look at that concept, but very much more from the perspective of managing your career and what that is like. So obviously aimed at an older audience. There's a lot of baseball in there, obviously. So if you like baseball, it's not just constantly about money. You get a lot of fun moments with the baseball games and how he handles all that and all that kind of stuff. So again, if you like baseball, this will probably be up your line. And it's an interesting twist on the whole concept. Quite a high budget in terms of animation, too. Nice voice acting, and just an interesting perspective on the whole hobby. And it's a half-hour TV series. I mean, it's a full TV series. That's kind of cool. All right, moving on to Hinamatsuri. This is one of the series that seems to have gotten a lot of attention this season. And it got some attention from me because I was intrigued by the beginning of the show. It has this very goofy concept where this little girl shows up in this guy's apartment and proceeds to kind of trash everything in his apartment until he gives her food and clothing and all that kind of stuff. What it turns out to be is the main character is a member of the Yakuza. And it's funny because last week we were talking about where are all the Yakuza anime. Main character's in the Yakuza. And this little girl turns out to be, you know, the anime trope of the little girl with massive powers in another dimension who can, you know, destroy a building with by pointing at it and a giant beam, you know, leaps out of her finger and blows up a building. She's those ridiculous powers. But she spends all of her time being a weapon. And in this world, he treats her, I mean, he doesn't know how to treat her like a daughter or anything, but he treats her like a human being. And she starts responding to that. So on the one hand, it's a very traditional anime kind of comedy, where it's two people in this wacky situation, they don't quite understand each other, and they're messing around with each other back and forth. And I really enjoyed that whole concept. I think it is well structured in terms of how it presents its characters and its information of revealing things in a very natural way. It's very easy for these shows to kind of throw things at you or be very obvious, or to try to be way too subtle. And this gets a nice little middle ground there. So good job on Hinamatsuri. Definitely more in a traditional anime style in terms of it's, you know, cute characters, some action, some comedy, that kind of stuff. If you're looking for something more, you know, it doesn't go too weird out of the traditional anime world, anime art style. Moving on to Isekai Izakaya. This is a weird one. It looks like normal anime. So this is about a traditional Japanese bar, basically, that fronts onto a Dungeons and Dragons style fantasy world. So it starts with two local guards walking along the street, and one of them says, hey, there's this great new bar in town, we should go in. And they go in, and the other guy hasn't been in there before, and he's introduced to this, you know, amazing Japanese bar where they have beer that tastes good and, you know, food that tastes good and all that stuff. And on the one hand, it is kind of playing around with the fact that, you know, modern food is so much better than what they had in the Middle Ages, just because we have access to, you know, clean drinking water all the time. And they actually make a point about the fact that, oh my gosh, they have glasses. Like, they can afford glass drinking implements. On the other hand, it appears to be very much a show about Japanese bar culture and restaurants. Like, it seems to be like basically an advertisement for that. In fact, yes, this appears to be funded partly by a Japanese tourism board, and or some tourism initiative around the Olympics and the Olympics beyond 2020. So I think it's kind of making people crave Japanese hospitality, basically. But it got a nice animation budget, some fun comedy, some fun elements around what it is like eating at a Japanese restaurant, and kind of the culture and how to be polite there. So fun. Short episodes, I think 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And you can kind of get in and out and enjoy yourself. So kind of nicely done. Also cooking theme, or I guess hospitality theme, Kakurio, which definitely feels like based on a Otome game. Bunch of hot guys, you know, girls surrounded by a bunch of hot guys. Think Fruits Basket as a classic example. Quite an old example now. But girl basically ends up in this hot springs hotel type environment for, like, monster hot men, right? Basically. It's Spirited Away, but with a teenage girl protagonist. Although I guess she's like 20 or so. So, on the one hand, like, that's an interesting concept. On the other hand, the attitudes around her being there and what she's expected to do feel, let's just say, very traditional. You know, she's kind of forced into things and expected to do things just because something happened. And it just feels like a very forced premise for the concept. And there's some backstory stuff from like, okay, this is obviously X. They're just not going to explain that now because they want that to be a big reveal at the end. So unfortunately, it's one of those shows where probably in later episodes it gets more interesting. It's just this first episode kind of has to be the expositional setup for the premise, and that just doesn't come off very well in this episode. So FYI, animation's okay. Voice acting, art, all that are certainly okay. Nothing really crazy to write home about, although the environment of this Ian is very lovingly rendered. So good job there. Moving on to Last Period. Not quite sure what this was while I was watching it. It's based on an MMO. I believe it's based on an existing MMO in Japan. And the main characters are all characters in this MMO world who go out on quests and accomplish things. So the idea is that this MMO world is real and exists, and the characters who go out on quests and do all that kind of stuff are doing that within the world's context and within the concept or the context of this story. They are, experiencing and exploring these things. Don't know what the title means, but it's very cute. It is adorable, and it is clearly meant to be just adorableness for 24 minutes. I have no familiarity with this MMO. They set it up like, I think what's happening here is basically what happens at the end of the storyline of the MMO or one of the MMO games or something. So they reference stuff that's happened in the past that you're supposed to know about, but clearly I don't know what's going on. And it feels like a season 2, but I don't know that there was a season 1 of this. But definitely cute. Again, fun, light, very comedic. There's a little bit of action, but it appears like it's very much tangential to the comedic fun stuff. Yeah, it's a cool thing. Definitely a relaxing show. You can just kind of sit back and enjoy. Not so much Legend of the Galactic Heroes, which is a remake of an incredibly long OVA. I've seen the first episode of the original OVA, and I think this episode actually does a better job of structuring the introduction of this setting in this world. It is a far future science fiction war story. So think Gundam, but without giant robots, basically. I'm sure a giant robot shows up at some point in this, but it's basically spaceships fighting in giant fleets. What's great is that the original OVA introduces sort of the antagonist and protagonist in the sense that there are kind of two main characters, one on each side of this conflict. Protagonist and antagonist is a little off. But in the original OVA, you get essentially equal times with each one. In this one, they spend the entire episode 1 on one of these characters and people around him. And I think it was a great way of doing things because you get to really understand him, see where he's coming from, see the factions, the politics going on around him. And then, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that they reference and hint at that character at the very end of the episode. So we'll clearly get more about him later on. It's definitely political. It's definitely slow-paced in the sense that there's a lot of, sci-fi ship stuff going on. But in terms of characters interacting, people aren't punching each other. They aren't, going crazy with each other, things like that. It is very much about people standing around and talking. But what I saw was nicely structured. It made sense. The characters felt realistic, and I think that's the most important thing here, where I understood where characters were coming from, and I believed in that. So good on there. And maybe that will work out. Moving on to Libra of Nil Admirari. Let me get my notes on this one, because this is another one where I remember it vaguely, but not so much all the details. Let's see here. There it is. This is the most otome anime this season. It is hot guys. I believe one of them is shirtless within like 60 seconds. Coming out of a shower. I mean, it's one of those shows. Set in a sort of quasi-Taisho era world. And then they delve into the concept of the first episode, which is this very disturbing horror concept. We're talking like people getting burned alive kind of disturbing horror concept. It is dark. And that's what kind of got my attention about this series, is that it's not just, you know, hot guys. It is interesting. They actually are doing something unusual in this genre, and they're going for it. This is a it's very much about how characters react to these things happening, and how you can do something about that. So I was very impressed with that. There are moments in here where I was like, dang. And also impressive. So one of my signals for when I'm impressed with an anime series is when I finish an episode and it either feels like 5 minutes has gone by or like an hour and a half has gone by. And this felt in a good way, right? It feels like they packed a movie into this first episode. And that's what they did with the first episode of Libra. A lot happens in that first episode, but it doesn't feel unnatural. They could have very easily padded this out. They don't, and it kind of moves on. So impressive there. Nice stuff. There's also some smart things around. So it's set in the 1920s, I believe, in Japan. Very different time, very different culture, and they reference some elements of that let you work out things that would be a little creepy to modern audiences, or a little weird to modern audiences. But they don't make a big deal out of it. You can realize, oh, that's what's going on. But if you don't make the connections, you're not going to realize that. So good on them there. Let's see here. Moving on to Love to Triangle. Another weird term. I have 3 notes about this. Lots of animation. High animation show. Cute. And fan service. I don't remember much of anything about this show. I think this is the show about a girl who goes to live in with a group of girls, and there's a lot. Oh yeah, right, that's right. She's going to live with a group of girls, and again, sort of an all-girls dorm concept. But they're all adults. But there's a lot of fan service. There's a lot of girls feeling up other girls and things along those lines. I thought it was cute. I thought it was enjoyable. The fan service felt kind of out of place though. So be aware of that, but nothing wrong with it. Let's see here. Then, Lupin the Third Part 5 over on Crunchyroll. So Lupin is an anime character, been around for, since the 70s. So he's a long-standing anime character. They've been doing movies of this, like a made-for-TV movie of this almost every year. They make new TV series every so often, and this is the new Lupin series. And it is co-produced in France. The show itself. So it's actually set in France, which is great because it looks gorgeous. There's also a relatively high animation budget, partly because of that co-production thing, and there's more money to flow. It is also very classic Lupin, as Matt says in the chat room. All the characters are there. They feel like the right characters, but there's a twist this time. It is a very modern twist, which I'm not going to spoil, around the problem that Lupin faces in this show. It appears... no spoilers, it appears that this is not an episodic Lupin series. I'm going to repeat that. This is not an episodic Lupin series. There is a story over the course of the entire season, it looks like, because they established some things in episode 1. Episode 2 is building off of that. And the antagonist Lupin has to deal with is really interesting. So I'm looking forward to see what happens there. There's some fun stuff. There is the expected... somewhat, they ignore physics occasionally when the action calls for it. There is occasional sexiness. Lupin is back in his more lecherous mode of early Lupin. There are definite references to Castle Cagliostro, if you've seen that. But you also notice this is Blue Jacket Lupin. So, curious to see where that's going. But neat stuff. They've done some good stuff to update the characters and build it up from there. Moving on to Magical Girl Ore, which is a Magical Girl parody. The main character is I think, 13-year-old, 14-year-old girl, and who is, it's not a spoiler to say, she actually begins the episode by dreaming that she is a magical girl, and then ends up actually being a magical girl, magical girl stuff starts happening, I'll put it that way. But it is very much a parody of magical girl stuff, to the point where in her dream, the villain starts vomiting out these rays, which turn everything black and white. And the cute little sidekick says, "Oh no, this is terrible. It's actually better for the colorists because it's much less work. But oh no, it's draining the color from everything." So really fun, really ridiculous. And yes, that's a dude in a dress. When she transforms, apparently, we haven't actually gotten to the transformation sequence yet in the show. But when she transforms, she turns into a ripped Arnold Schwarzenegger version of herself, who is very much looks like a guy, and that is her magical girl, form. So a lot of fun, a lot of ridiculous, and just really what I like is it is very much playing around with magical girl tropes and magical girl expectations and so forth. So that's I like it when series go that deep into these concepts. All right, moving right along. Megalobox. This is based on the, I believe, the 30th anniversary of Ashita no Joe, or Tomorrow's Joe, which is a legendary boxing anime and manga from the 70s. 80s, 90s, 40 years, gosh. Anyway, and this is a reimagining of Tomorrow's Joe. The characters are completely different, and it has this very much sci-fi twist. So, again, think Cowboy Bebop, very much in here, in terms of the overall tone of the show. It's about people, kind of dregs of society, just trying to get by, underground boxing rings, that kind of a thing. High animation budget, and one of the best 50 years. Jeez. Thank you, The Dark Blacksmith. That's crazy. And the manga started in 1968. So on the one hand, it is, to an extent, about society and people on different sides of society. The haves versus the have-nots. But it is also about what the have-nots do with their lives. How do you break out of those cycles if you can? To me, always the sign of a successful sports anime for me is whether I get excited about that sport from watching the show. Whether I am like, I want to go see this sport live now as a result of watching the show. And Megalobox definitely does that for boxing. I should point out, you can see from the art here, the characters actually wear like these mechanical accoutrements that kind of clasp onto their bodies as these kind of rigs that make them punch more strongly. And so there's kind of that sci-fi element to it. It's a very interesting concept, and the art style is not your typical anime series. It merges sort of the traditional Joe aesthetic with more modern anime concepts. Samurai Champloo, absolutely, in sort of a tone and art style, I think, coming in here. So, again, if you're looking for something aimed at I would say this is still aimed at like a mid-teen audience, much like Original Joe. But the aesthetic is definitely aiming more for that more, the older side of that audience, and also clearly, I think, aiming at an American audience and a worldwide audience as well. This feels much more like New York than Tokyo. Moving on to My Sweet Tyrant. What on earth? Goofy love story. That is my entire note for My Sweet Tyrant. This falls into this category of anime that seems to be a pretty popular thing now, of two characters in a romantic comedy who are clearly supposed to be together, like one loves the other, but one of them is kind of an a-hole to the other all the time. But it's supposed to be okay because it's a comedy and it's supposed to be funny. And I just can't get behind that. There's just something, the disconnect for that to me is just too strong. And it just doesn't really work for me. Basically, main character here, I believe, he is so enamored with this girl that he can't say anything nice to her. He has to say nasty things to her, otherwise he'll just kind of explode. And it just, I don't know. I can't get behind that concept. It feels too weird. And to be clear, like, she understands that he doesn't mean it in a sense, but it's still just a weird concept. So, oh well, didn't work for me, but I can see some folks, laughing at that. Speaking of a show that didn't work for me, Persona 5, the animation. I have not played Persona 5. I would like to. I've heard excellent things about Persona 5. But what I saw of this felt very much... It felt, in a weird way, like it was just checking off everything on the list. Like, we have to introduce this, we have to explain this, we have to show this. And I didn't care for any of the characters. They didn't really make me feel bad for any of the characters. Even the big show-stopping number action sequence from the beginning of the episode felt flat in a weird way, and I can't really tell why. But it just felt like we need an action sequence here, so we're gonna throw it in. Again, the characters are just kind of there. I don't understand why I would care about them, and I don't know. There's a lot of stuff in here that, yeah, it just felt dull, very much by the numbers. Also, some weak voice acting in the first episode with some of the minor characters. I don't know. It may be one of those things that just doesn't translate to animation very well, where the concept fits a video game, but when you try to make that a linear story, it just feels wrong. I don't know, but it just I want to try. I think this is one of those cases where you'd be better off playing the video game than watching the anime series. But who knows? Maybe it'll go somewhere. Also, could just be a poor first episode. Moving on to Space Battleship Tiramisu, which, as you can tell from the art, looks like a giant robot mecha real robot anime series, except that they are fighting over food. This is a goofy comedy series set in very much a Gundam setting and universe, just with all the serial numbers filed off. So it feels very much like folks who are like, we want to make a Gundam comedy. The concepts, and it's I think 7-minute episodes. The concepts for the individual episodes are just very much wacky comedy concepts, very much in the 4-koma manga, again, Lucky Star, whatever. Overall tone for the show goes very over the top at times. There's one episode that's about him trying to, he gets into to pilot his mecha, but he accidentally put his shirt on inside out and backwards, so it's very awkward for him to move. So he's trying to, take the shirt off while piloting, and then you defeat some people, and then now I can get this one thing off and do some more piloting, and can I get it over my head? Oh, this other guy's coming. It's that kind of humor. I enjoyed it partly because I'm just a sucker for anything Gundam style, especially open Gundam style. And I just really thought this was a loving tribute to Gundam story cliches with those sort of weird comedy concepts layered on top of it. So I really enjoyed it, but that could just be me. All right, just fun stuff. Moving on to Tada Never Falls in Love. I really enjoyed this, but I can't remember from the art what it is. And I've got my notes here somewhere. Yes. So this is a very traditional, very middle-of-the-road anime series, kind of one of these moe anime series. Not moe, but if you like the anime art style and you like shows that just look like anime, that is what this show is. It's about Japanese characters who stumble across a foreigner girl who's kind of wandering around Japan. And it turns out she is, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, that she is a fan of Japan. Like, she's kind of like that otaku fangirl or fanboy who just thinks Japan is the greatest place in the world and is just so thrilled to be here. And as a result, she's doesn't quite understand certain aspects of Japanese culture. She's very polite, like she gets along very well, she speaks excellent Japanese, but that show that you love isn't actually watched by everyone all the time. But it's a cute show, very very nice, heartwarming show about various characters trying to be nice to each other, trying to be good people. And there's just fun stuff. There's fun little jokes that we otaku would understand about people being kind of over-obsessed with things without pandering to the characters. Quite a nice animation budget. This is a show about just anime characters standing around talking and wandering around Japan. It feels very much like an advertisement for Japan, though. Again, I feel like this might be one of those tourism sponsored shows, not entirely. But it's a really, it's a beautiful show. Very much getting across kind of how lovely Japan can be. and it's cool. It's one of those shows that, again, if you're into anime, this will feel very comfortable for you, and very much into that style of show. Really fun. Really fun. So moving on to, this is a surprise. Today's menu for the Emiya family. So I started watching this show, and it just shows a young man, a young woman, who go out walking in their local neighborhood, and they're going out to buy, food for that night's dinner. And I saw the girl, and I was like, huh, that looks like Saber. It's weird. Then she turns around, guy turns around, and it's Saber. This is an anime series set in the Fate universe, but as a light-hearted domestic cooking show. It's about the two main characters as a couple going out, getting food, coming back and preparing the meal, preparing dinner, and going through. I mean, they spend several minutes showing how the meal is prepared and everything that goes into it, and in beautiful animated detail, showing every ingredient being cooked. It's a cooking show in the Fate universe. Okay. It's really interesting. Lovingly detailed. Again, a lot of animation budget. I think it's short episodes, but I was really impressed with it. I have watched basically none of the Fate series. I just haven't had time to dive into that whole universe yet. But I was charmed. I was like, oh, yeah, I'll watch more of this. I have no idea who these characters are, except you can't avoid the Fate universe. But it was charming. Absolutely. So it won me over, despite me having basically no exposure to that universe. Moving on to Uma Musume Pretty Derby. Boy, this is a moe series. This is a weird moe series because it is about... So you have a lot of these moe series where there's one weird twist. Like Katana Maidens, where, girls have these katanas with magical powers in them, and they defend Japan from monsters. Whatever. Idolmaster, idol shows, whatever. This is about girls who are basically treated like horses. They're very good at running, and so they compete in derbies. And they have names the way horses have names. And they go through the competitions. And it is all of the trappings of horses, but with teenage girls. And maybe I'm just old, but it just feels kind of objectifying to these characters. I know they don't exist, I know they're not real, but it's just weird. Like, I expected somebody to hand out oats and for them to eat them from their hand. It's just a little bit too... I don't know. I think part of the problem is that they go to the Derby, and it's exactly like a Kentucky Derby track, right? It's all those elements. They go into the cages, and those release, and they start running. I should point out, they're completely clothed the entire time. It's not that kind of a show. There's a little bit of weird... I don't know. I found that too bizarre to really allow me to fully enjoy the series. I watched the entire first episode. It was cute. Characters were fun to watch and play around with. Oh, and by the way, of course, when they win a race, they then give a concert because they can't not be idols. So, I don't know. Again, nice animation, nice character designs. All of the quality is there. All the production quality is there. No complaints about any of that stuff. Just the concept is creepy. I don't know. Again, maybe that's just me. Maybe it's me being who I am. Moving on to a show that really surprised me. Yotsuhiro Biyori is an anime series set at a traditional Japanese cafe. And it's sort of like a Japanese tea house, although not as in the tea ceremony, just one of these little cafe places where you can order, tea and coffee, and they'll have a handful of snacks and maybe a few meals you can order, but it's not like a full-service restaurant. And it's basically about this cafe and the people that they serve. The entire staff are men, So I thought this would be a very sort of fan servicey boys love thing, but not so far in episode 1. It's just they're all guys and they all, you know, hang out and talk, but there's no shirtlessness. You know, there's none of those elements that feels like they're kind of pushing that side of things. And the main character doesn't appear to be it doesn't look like she's, you know, lusting after any of the guys or anything, or like any of them are lusting after her. So I can't quite peg, and I'm not complaining, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm saying that I can't quite peg what the show is trying to be, what its audience is. I think it's just kind of everybody, because it is this very relaxing show about what it's like to just sit at a restaurant and relax for a little while, and maybe do a little work, and just enjoy a nice cup of tea, and maybe a little snack, and just recharge for a bit. It's the kind of thing that you don't expect to see out of a lot of anime. It's non-flamboyant. It's very relaxing. And I really like that. I really enjoyed that. Finally, moving on to You Don't Know Gunma Yet. This show was paid for, at least partially, by the tourism board for Gunma Prefecture, which is kind of a little out of the way in Japan. And again, it seems to be one of those things to try to get people to come to Japan around the Olympics and so forth. But what they've done is they have gone very heavily in the other direction. So apparently Gunma is not very well known. It's not a big tourist destination in Japan. So they present it as being this bizarrely out of the way place that takes you just forever to get to, and the people there are cut off from society. And so they go as over the top as possible with people's expectations around Gunma, and like they turn into like this zombie survival horror apocalypse concept in episode 1, which then kind of gets thrown away. But it's very, very over the top with this idea of Gunma. So essentially it is clearly Gunma is awesome, but we're, instead of trying to pitch that to you, we're going to pretend that Gunma is terrible. And then, you know, eventually over the course of the show, I'm sure they'll show more of Gunma being a worthwhile place to be. But I really enjoy the chutzpah of their presentation of this show. I think it's a really fun concept, and they just did a really good job of surprising me with this anime series. Short episodes, budget is fine, voice acting is fine, nothing too crazy here, but full points for style and for guts on that one. So those are all the shows I saw this season. Somebody mentioned in the chat room the new, what was that? The new, where was it? The Sword Art Online Alternative GGO series. And yeah, because that's part of the Sword Art series, I figured it's basically a sequel. Same thing with Steins Gate Zero, where I started watching that, and so it appears to be kind of an alternate timeline sequel to Steins Gate. So I think it's one of those things where, you know, you probably want to go back and watch original Steins Gate, or be interested in that if you want to do Steins Gate Zero. Not sure, but I watched that and was like, you know, as of the first few minutes, I was like, I feel like I should watch Steins Gate before watching this series. So who knows? Anyway, that is all the shows that I could fit in this season. I hope you find this useful. And there are lots more videos here to consume. Hope you will check those out. Thanks for watching. See you next time. All right. Let's get some water in me first. Exactly, Tonto. Where are the horse boys? Come on. By the way, I would argue, I saw some of the chat, I would argue Asuka is pretty tsundere. I think she falls pretty squarely in the tsundere category. Thanks, Game Escape. Yeah, that was an hour. That was over an hour of talking about anime. Probably my longest segment yet. Probably, yeah. I'll recover momentarily. So actually, I happen to know this. Evo was released in English in America in 1998 on VHS. Subtitled only, I believe. But yeah, I mean, that's part of my going back to the 20 years ago dramatic readings. People are talking about watching Eva. The ADV tapes, VHS tapes, were out in '98 over here, which was earlier than I thought. I did not know it was out that early. And I think the DVDs came out around 2000, maybe year 2000. And of course, that gets into how many folks actually watched it on VHS versus DVD. I think the big a lot of folks watched it on VHS, but I think the really big upswing in people watching Evangelion was the DVDs. I think the tapes were a large number of folks, but not nearly the volume that the DVDs got. Thinking more back to what you say, Matt, about Asuka being kind of tsundere, I actually see more what you're talking about. Thinking about Asuka's personality, she doesn't really have a thing for Shinji. She's not tsundere in the case that she clearly has a crush on Shinji, because she doesn't. She's just kind of cruel. I mean, she may have feelings somewhere deep inside, but it's not really the tsundere archetype. Yeah, they'll definitely milk fate every way they can. You're absolutely right. High Dive's been around for a year or so now. They are High Dive is one of the licensors. Their service, like Funimation.com, High Dive is somebody's. Should have it right here. Let's see. Just pull up High Dive here real quick. Hopefully it will do that. See here. I only have About Us. No. Where do they talk about it? The About Us doesn't explain where they're from, but it's definitely maybe under careers. I'll give you a hint. Acer Media Group. Oh no, that's the staffing company. But yeah, High Dive is one of the American licensors' official streaming service. They just decided to name it something weird. And I think they've made themselves. They made deals for some stuff outside of that licensing company's deals, but it's primarily that, as I recall. See here. Asuka feels more tsundere in the Rebuild series, mainly 2.2. It's called the original series. They tone her down a bit. Yeah, from what I've seen of 2, I agree. She's definitely more in the tsundere mode. I mean, I would argue that Asuka is, in a sense, a prototype. She was one of the characters that built the tsundere kind of archetype, where she was kind of an early version of that concept, not fully formed, if you will. Not that it works that way, but you know what I mean. Where I think when the tsundere concept formed in, like you say, like in the early 2000s, I think Asuka was one of the building blocks to that. One of the characters they were looking back and saying, it's kind of like Asuka. See, Matt, I don't, yeah, I mean, this is what manga fans said about the anime series, right? This is what, every time there's an adaptation of something, the people who love the original dislike the adaptation, so. Otaku Nikoi wa Muzukashi offers a bunch of otoko working there, and the thing is, it shows otoko as responsible and well-balanced. So, otoko means men. You mean otaku? Or just people, just men? That is interesting, though. I mean, definitely there's a lot of anime that's more about, otaku are fine, normal people. That's kind of the weird thing about that show, is it's kind of like ha ha ha, otaku are goofy and weird. Like, you do realize who you're advertising this to, like who's watching this. Bizarre. Okay, so these can be thrown away. All my notes. Okay, otaku. Interesting. Otaga is totally tsundere. Taiga is arguably the prototypical tsundere. She kind of created the archetype, I would say, Taiga. And I assume you mean Taiga from getting the name of it now. But yeah, that Taiga. Because I have seen none of that show. I should point out. I watched the first episode and it just wasn't for me. But from what I've seen and read of it, there's definitely something down there that she cares for that character. Much stronger than Asuka shows, I think. Just from how folks have described the character arcs and her behavior, I would assume. Okay. So I was gonna do Otaku no Cooking, but I'm frankly exhausted. I think, tell you what, let's hold off on Otaku no Cooking for a little while. I'm gonna just keep on talking. I'm gonna keep on chatting. We may hold off on Otaku no Cooking until next week. That's fine. Oh, actually, we're gonna have to. Toradora, thank you. I have not made the rice yet. So we're going to have to hold off on Otaku no Cooking until next week. I apologize. I forgot to prepare the rice. I should have done that. So next week we will make onigiri. That is the reality there. So here's a question. What shows have you been watching this season that you are keeping up with? What's exciting you and interesting you about anime this season? I will not promise to keep up with these things, but I'll tell you the shows that I would like to watch more of. You don't know Gunma yet. Space Battleship Tiramisu. Today's menu for Emiya family. Let's see. Lupin the Third, definitely. I'd like to watch more Magical Girl Ore, but I just don't know that I can fit it in. Megalobox I'd like to check out more of. Hinamatsuri, I like the concept. Hinamatsuri, I will probably watch an episode or two of, but I expect it's going to kind of level off in terms of concepts. I like Izakaya, and it's a short series, so I'll probably keep up with that. Full Metal Panic, oh yeah. Gundam Build Divers, oh yeah. That's probably it. I like Tada Never Falls in Love, but again, it's one of those series where I will probably not be able to fit it in, sadly. Do I have a favorite manga? Yeah, I do. Yeah, Nausicaa the Valley of Wind. Nausicaa is the most impressive manga. It is the most expressive work of the comic art in my experience. Now, there are other manga that I enjoy more in the moment, right? I don't particularly think, oh my gosh, every night I want to go back and reread Nausicaa. But that's kind of head and shoulders above everything else in terms of so many different elements. But also, so a good example there is I do not seek to emulate that art style. Right? I do not take inspiration from Miyazaki's art style because I'm just not interested in drawing that more European style of comic. So it's different, right? Princess and the Pilot, nice. I have the Girls in Panzer movie sitting over there for me to watch at some point soon. I definitely want to get to that movie. You mean to get to that? Yeah, Megalobox is very interesting. That could definitely be a breakout hit this season. That could be a classic. Lupin is hard because it's already a classic. It's always a classic. How is Princess and the Pilot? What is it like? What you know? What's a quick précis? I will tell you, I'm looking forward to, now that I've checked out this season's anime, I can go back to what I've been doing before, and I'm going to move into Nadia and the Secret of Blue Water. That's my next show to finish. So hopefully this weekend I hope to make some progress there. Nice movie, cool. Oh, I should point out, from the straw poll, I will be watching Garden of Sinners. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. No. Oh. What was it? 1 second. Oh, it was over here. Ha ha ha. 1 sec. Was it Garden of Words or Garden of Sinners that won? I forget. Garden of Sinners. Yeah. So I'll be reviewing Garden of Sinners sometime in April. I've actually seen that first movie, so that will not be hard. Place further than the universe. Place further than the universe. Place. Gosh, I'm forgetting now. Oh, right. Right. I was thinking movies for some reason. As the alternate? Cool. Ah, cool. Yeah, don't need to watch the original. Cool. If I'd known it was a spin-off that was unrelated, I would have checked that out. But it looked like it was basically a sequel. I bought the manga of My Hero Academia, like the first volume, and it just did nothing for me. It was just, for some reason, just that concept just, I don't know, doesn't work. It's strange. Everyone else loves it, and I can understand why, but bizarre. I've been very inspired by the art of Shaman King recently, and really digging into that. I really like just the overall approach he has to characters, facial expressions, art, and so forth. You're right. It sounds like Place Promise. That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, Legend of Galactic Heroes was impressive. Like they clearly knew what they were doing, and they gave it their all, and they gave it a nice presentation, a very comprehensible but budget animation approach. Oh, interesting. I may try more of Tada then. I'm not against that at all. All right. I think that's going to do it. That tired me out way more than I thought. So I was planning to push more into more, to talk about more tonight, but I am just... Oh well. So no more. So I'll be doing video games Sunday, drawing Tuesday, and workshop Wednesday. For those who didn't see it before, this Wednesday is this. Be assembling that live on stream, and then next Friday back to the usual schedule. So, thanks all for joining me. Again, sort of a short night tonight, and then hopefully next week we'll be able to do onigiri, because I will have remembered to actually make rice. So thanks all. Take care. Hope you find some more interesting anime to watch out of this, and I will see you all next time. Take care. Have a great weekend.